Both of these bikes next to me are from Ride1UP, a brand that we like a lot and recommend often. Today we're going to be taking a look at two different bikes in their commuter lineup with the Ride1UP 700 and the Ride1UP Prodigy V1. We're going to be comparing and contrasting these to better answer the question, which one might be right for you.
Hey riders, welcome back to Electric Bike Report. I'm Justin, this is Griffin, and today we're going to be comparing the Ride1UP 700 series versus the Prodigy V1. Now we're gonna do this how we think you would first, which is first look at the price and go through the specs. So price-wise, the 700 series comes in right around $1,700, while the Prodigy V1 is priced, again, MSRP, just under $2,300. And you'll see that as you compare the specs side by side. The Prodigy V1 generally just has a little bit nicer build across the board. But they're both commuter e-bikes, they're both class 3, so they have pedal assist up to 28 miles per hour. Now, the 700 series does that with a rear hub motor from Bafang. It's 750 watts, 60 newton meters of torque, pretty fast, but because it's a rear hub motor, you also get the throttle. So you can throttle up to 20 miles per hour, whereas on the Prodigy V1, you can't. And this is one of the biggest differences, is that the Prodigy V1 comes with a mid-drive motor from Brose. So that mid-drive motor has 250 watts, 90 newton meters of torque. You don't get a throttle, but you get that natural, kind of more natural riding experience that you get with a mid-drive. And as we go through this review, you're gonna notice us coming back to the mid-drive motor quite a bit, because that is one of the biggest differences between the two bikes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of interesting because once you start adding up some of the other key and notable specs in there, you start to see two different ways of executing a commuter style bike, right? So if we kind of take a look first at the Prodigy V1 here, add together some of those key features, you have a rigid fork, a slightly thinner tire at 2 inches wide, and it's about 9 pounds less than the 700, which fits the theme of the Prodigy. It is a bike that is about efficiency and precision and nimble handling, and a lot of emphasis was placed on that with the parts pick here. But as you go over to the 700 series, it's got a lot of things that add up to a really comfortable and really easy to manage ride. You already mentioned the throttle, of course, which is gonna have some appeal, but you also have this front fork here, 100 millimeters of travel, and then on a slightly wider 2.4 inch tire. It's gonna give you some comfort. It's gonna make it a little bit easier to kind of maintain your balance. Different form of handling, but something that's got a lot of appeal for your average everyday rider, and even to someone more experienced as well. So really, as you kind of look at these bikes head to head, they both represent really great value. But you of course have that $500 difference in the MSRP price. But with the version 1.0 of the Prodigy here, actually the V2 just dropped recently, so there might be some savings here as well. Make sure to click on the links in our description below to see up-to-date pricing on that one.
And I would just add, if you notice, we didn't walk through all the specs here. You can go to our comparison posts in the individual reviews and see those specs side by side. And as you do, again, you'll be able to kind of see the slight difference in quality of the components. But overall, I'll echo what Griffin said, Ride1UP is pretty well known in the industry for providing a lot of bang for your buck with all of their bikes.
All right, and now for the fun part where we get to compare these two bikes head to head and see how they performed. Here at EBR, we actually take a lot of time to extensively test these bikes, and we have different categories that we put them in to test specific things. So one of those things to start off, let's take a look at the hill test results and see how these help in hill performance. And Justin, I'm gonna pass that one off to you because you are the dedicated hill tester here at EBR.
Yes, I drew the short straw, and I'm just very glad that they're actually e-bikes. So when we do the hill test, again, we do it throttle only, and then we do it in max PAS level. So in terms of who wins the throttle, that one's pretty easy. The 700 series obviously wins it because it has a throttle. It climbed hellhole in just a minute and 48 seconds, average about 10 miles an hour. So if you want to climb a hill without pedaling anything and just throttle up it, the obvious choice is going to be the 700 there. Now, when you then go into highest PAS level, so that's PAS 5 for the 700 series, that is boost mode for the Prodigy V1. The 700 series made it up in a minute and 21, which is 13.4 miles per hour, and the Prodigy V1 made it up in a minute 34 seconds or 11.5 miles per hour. So that's actually pretty common what we see. The rear hub motors do just kind of push you up the hill a little bit more, whereas the mid-drive, it's that more natural where you're getting a little bit more of a workout. And if you watch both of these videos, and if you compared, like when I'm talking in the videos, I'm always a little bit more out of breath on the mid-drives than I'm on the hub motors. And so that, I'm not gonna say either one of those is good or bad. That really is up to you. With the 700 series, you can climb a hill a little bit faster. You won't have to put as much, effort into it. But if you're someone that wants a little bit more of a workout, you want to put in your own wattage and have the motor amplify it, that's when you're going to choose the Prodigy over the 700 series.
Yeah, I think with the two respectable finishing times there, it's just going to be a stylistic choice at the end of the day, which one you prefer. So. One of the other tests that we do here though is also a range test where we test the bikes at its maximum assistance setting and minimum assistance setting on two different trials so we can establish those bookend values of range. And in the range department, the Prodigy V1 did really well, giving the rider between 32 and 73 miles across the two different range tests that we did. Even more impressive, that 73-mile result, we actually did it on Tour instead of Eco. We were going just a little bit faster instead of the very lowest one there. So you could actually get even more range than that 73 miles. Whereas on the 700 series, we had results between 25 and 45 miles. Now, overall, again, it kind of speaks to the nature of the two different bikes. The V1 here has a little bit more rider input. It's just able to go further while still giving you meaningful assistance and help. Whereas the 700 here, I mean, it went really fast over both of those two different range tests that we did. And it is just a little bit easier to kind of get things going, but it does lead to a little bit of a lower result because it is a little bit more, battery intensive, I'd say.
Yeah, but I mean, you still bookend that 25 to 45 miles on the 700 is very impressive. And as you mentioned, kind of the speed, which brings us to our next one, which is the speed testing. So we take the bikes through and ask the question, how fast do they go at each assist level, right? So assist 1 through 5 on the 700 series. Then we have Eco, Tour, Sport, and Boost. So essentially 1 through 4 on the Prodigy V1. And you'll see in these numbers how fast that 700 series is. It is pretty fast. So without any passengers pedal assist, the 700 series was at 11.2 miles per hour. PS1 jumped to 12.9, PS2 15.8 miles per hour, PS3 19.5 miles per hour, PS4 24.4 miles per hour, PS5 28.1 miles per hour. And I can tell you, as you ride this bike, it really does, sometimes you have to work to get it up to speed. This, you don't have to work that much.
Not so much the case now.
No, it's very fast, but again, comfortable in that speed. And so the things that we're looking for is kind of a difference between each assist level. So it's not like once you hit PS3, you're going 30 miles per hour already, right? So really good results on the 700 series. On the Prodigy V1, it also did fairly well with no PAS level. We pedaled 13.1 miles per hour. In Eco, that jumped to 15.2 miles per hour. Tour was 17.6. Sport got up to 23.2 miles per hour, and Boost just under 27 miles, so 26.8. And one thing to keep in mind on the Prodigy V1, again, it's amplifying the amount of wattage that you're putting in. And so when I've taken out the Prodigy V1, the thing that I've noticed is if I push harder, it gets you up to that speed faster. If I want to not sweat as much, it'll get slower. So it's a little more precise and a little more user input based. And so if I'm comparing these two, if I had to use a single word for the 700 series, I would just say damn fast. Okay, those 2 words, but it's just fast, right? The Prodigy V1, I just think it's very, again, precise is the word that I would use, but it still feels very natural and powerful. But it's just, it's 2 different motors, 2 different engagements. Both of them actually perform fairly well.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I feel like kind of that precision like you're talking about, like when you're on the V1, it's like, you know, if you're navigating stop and go traffic or something like that, you're kind of making little micro adjustments. It's a little bit easier because you're dictating that somewhat like with your feet. On the 700 series, it's gonna really thrive in the open road, fitting the damn fast theme that you helped it establish there. But kind of different speed profiles, but both really fun, really enjoyable rides, just kind of in different ways, I'd say. And then for our final test that we have, it was the brake test. And this one's pretty straightforward as well. So we have 2 different brake setups here. The Prodigy V1 has the Tektro Orion 4-piston hydraulic disc brakes with 180mm rotors, whereas the 700 is on the Tektro HDE 350 with 180mm rotors as well. But that is a dual piston setup versus the 4-piston, and we actually did get some different results. So the Prodigy stopped on our brake test at an average of 20 feet 8 inches, whereas the 700 was 23 feet. So a little bit quicker stopping time with the Prodigy. I think combination of both the 4-piston versus 2 and just the lighter weight, a little bit easier to stop faster. But in all honesty, this one's in some ways kind of a push for me, at least, because they both stop pretty well and reliably, I'd say. But
yeah, and I would kind of echo that with my experience, except for I would add that the Prodigy V1, again, just feels a little bit more geared towards like the natural cyclist. And it's just a little bit more precise with its handling. It's that lighter weight, just all of that kind of combined does give you better stopping power. Also, it's really nice to see those Orion, you know, brakes on that. That's actually a really good brake set for that price point, and does just help you stop a little bit more. But I would say I don't think you need to upgrade the brakes on the 700 series. That's not what we want you to think. But yes, with that extra $500, one of the upgrades you get is a better braking system, and so you can brake a little bit faster between the higher end brakes and the lighter weight on the bike.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I mean, there you have it. There's the data from all of our testing. So we'll kind of leave that up to you to decide what type of ride and performance you want when picking between these 2 bikes.
All right, so we've taken you through how each bike compared in our testing. Now Griff and I are going to try to award a category winner on a handful of different categories. And before we do, just want to throw out a caveat and a very big asterisk. We're kind of dealing with a scenario of good, better, best here, where just because we give the checkbox the award to one bike does not mean that the other bike is not good quality. And you see that with the first category that we're going to award, and that's specs. So the winner we're going to give that to is the Prodigy V1. It is a bike that costs about $500 more, depending on the price of the day. And you see that you see the increase in quality across all the, kind of from the back of the bike to the front of the bike on the specs. You do just get an upgrade on the Prodigy V1, which is why we're gonna give that a winner. But it does not mean the 700 series is not a good, you know, well-spec'd bike.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, at the end of the day, especially where these 2 bikes are coming from the same brand, that's kind of the expectation. If I'm spending more here, probably getting a few nicer, fancier parts or something like that. But what you have on the 700 is still rock solid in terms of its spec. And as we kind of talk a little bit about like some of their key differences, like we talked about before, moving into our second category is motor. In terms of its speed, its engagement, and just the overall power you get. We also gave that to the Prodigy here. It is not easy to make an e-bike motor. There's like, I have not made one from scratch, you know, but I think in general to like really nail a mid-drive, it's a little bit harder, and that Brose motor on there really is just such a good ride. You can kind of almost close your eyes and forget you're on an e-bike more often than not when you're riding around on it. It has such a good engagement and just really does multiply your efforts when you're out there on the roads. I like what the 700 has, but you know, that like hub motor is a lot of fun with that torque, or with the throttle on there, excuse me, to just kind of like blast and go whenever is nice. But at the end of the day, I'd probably take the Prodigy motor.
And I would agree as well. I would also note that Brose motor is very quiet. And so you can kind of end up passing people on like a city path, and they don't realize that you're on an e-bike. They just think you're going really fast. And so yeah, I think that's a definite win, but that's not saying the 700 series is not a good quality motor. And you see that in the next category, which is the hill climbing ability. The winner that we have for that is the 700 series, right? So again, I'm the one that tests all the bikes on the hill, and it is just a fundamental different feeling of hub motor versus mid-drive. But when you just look at the stats, right, for the category win, the 700 series has a throttle, so it can throttle you up a hill if you like that. Prodigy doesn't. Not a bad thing on the Prodigy, just doesn't have it. When you go to the highest assist level, the 700 series beat the Prodigy up time-wise, and it is just a little better hill climber in a different way. Again, this is gonna really come down to your personal preference. If you're someone that doesn't want to sweat up a hill and get up easier, this 700 series is going to be a better option. If you wanna put in some of your own watts and still make it up the hill and be like, wow, I can't believe I climbed that, but breathing a little bit heavier, you'll go with the Prodigy. But just based on the times, I mean, we kind of had to give the winner to the 700 series.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's fair. Moving into our next category, we have range. So range here, that's something that we awarded to the Prodigy. I mean, not only did it have further distances, but as we discussed before, it could have even probably gotten more had we tested it in eco mode. But this was actually a closer contest than it looks on paper, because it wasn't just who went further, because that's kind of the obvious answer, but a lot of it was how impressed were we with the efficiency of those range results and some other details. The 700 almost caught it because their max power tests were actually pretty close, only I think 6 or 7 miles separating them. But I mean, the 700 did that far faster, far easier, it's kind of different at the end of the day, but I think just knowing that you can go several days, maybe even a week without having to worry about charging gives it the edge to the Prodigy here.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I mean, if you're just looking straight up range, you definitely get more for the Prodigy. If you want fast range, then the 700 series. But 45 miles, make no mistake about it, is still a good result on the Prodigy, or sorry, on the 700. So next category, we have ride quality. And we broke ride quality into 2 categories because each bike kind of wins in these 2 different categories. One is from a comfort standpoint, one would be from a handling standpoint.
Yeah, and for me, I think when it comes down to comfort, the 700 gets the win here. It does just have a few other things that, going back to the fork with that 100 millimeters of travel and the tires being a little bit wider, it's just a more comfortable, relaxed ride. You can kind of cruise around on it. It's the type of bike where it's comfortable enough that I don't have to be going somewhere to want to ride, to ride it. I can just go out, ride and enjoy it, knowing it's going to be a pretty good ride and pretty smooth sailing. So leaned a little bit towards the 700 in terms of comfort, but the handling was really good on the Prodigy though. So
yeah, and I would say that is the element that stood out most for me in terms of ride quality, because I really appreciated how it was a little bit lighter. That 9 pounds, I could feel the frame felt a little stiffer, and so the bike, when you combine that with that Brose mid-drive motor, with how precise that and responsive that motor is, it really just makes the bike feel more nimble and just gives it a better overall handling, which again, I think makes sense because it appeals more to traditional cyclists, whereas the comfort side appeals to your more average rider. Again, both are good reasons. It more comes down to you individually.
Yeah, largely it depends on your style. And then for our final category, we went with value for the money, and this one may have been the hardest one to pick. I mean, simply put, Ride1UP is known for being a brand that provides tremendous value, so to have 2 of the different bikes and to pick which one was really hard. At the end of the day, we went with the one that's probably gonna have more mass appeal, the one that is not as expensive, and that's the 700 here, for around 1,500 bucks. I mean, it leaves you wanting for very little, and I think it's going to appeal to just about anybody. But again, it was really close contest.
Yeah, definitely close, and that 700 series we found usually is kind of about $200 to $300-ish less expensive than a comparable model if you compare across brands. But I could still come back and make an argument on the Prodigy, because if you're looking at it from that lens, if you're speccing out a comparable mid-drive with all the different components that the Prodigy V1 has, I'd say it's about $500 to maybe even $1,000 less than some competing models. And so again, you could probably make an argument for both. They both offer really good bang for your buck value for the money that Ride1UP is known for. But in the end, we did choose the one that is just least expensive and gave the award to the 700 series.
Yeah. So there you have it. Kind of looking at the final tally here, we have 4 things for the Prodigy, 3 for the 700, but they were very close contests basically down the line. So at the end of the day, it always just kind of matters what matters most for you and your personal preference and style, but at least for us, we narrowly gave it to the V1.
Yeah. So which bike are you going to buy? The Ride1UP 700 series or the Prodigy V1? Not to dodge the question, but genuinely speaking, the answer is it really does depend on you and what your personal preferences are, what your budget is. I think if we're looking at answering the question of what are most people, which bike casts the bigger net, I'm probably gonna say the 700 series. Its price point, under that $1,700 range, the comfort that you get, the fun factor that you get with that rear hub motor, I do think it just actually appeals to a broader range of riders.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. As for the Prodigy though, I mean, I kind of view that one as a little bit more of like a precision instrument, right? It's something that I think more experienced cyclists are gonna appreciate just a little bit more. The nimble nature of it all, the ability to control your speed when you're moving around at traffic. I see a lot of people who ride around cities now looking at an e-bike, want to kind of look this direction, especially if you're looking for a more affordable mid-drive motor. But obviously, because of the 2 different motors, if that's the beating heart of an e-bike, they have 2 very different beating hearts, so it kind of just matters which, is a bigger deal to you.
Yeah, and I would just kind of echo that. Like the motor really is the heart and the core to an e-bike, and so that's really the biggest decision you're making, rear hub versus mid-drive. Either way, to be honest, I think you're going to be happy with either of these bikes.
I don't see this as something where you're going to end up going wrong. Either way, it's going to be a fantastic ride, but we are curious and we do want to know, which one would you end up picking? Please let us know down in the comments below with that. And I mean, that's all we have for you today. That's been the Ride1UP 700 versus the Prodigy V1. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you can stick around for more comparisons that we'll have coming out soon.